Let's start today's video. As Lieutenant William Clark regained consciousness, he found himself lying on what resembled an operating table. Around him, three red-skinned beings were engrossed in discussion, paying scant attention to his bloodied abdomen and the scorched patches on his left arm, the aftermath of a plasma cannon. The world swam before William's eyes, colors bleeding together like watercolors in rain. He tried to call out, to make any sound that might catch the attention of the three figures hovering nearby, but his mouth refused to cooperate. His tongue felt like lead, his throat raw and unresponsive. All he could manage was a weak, barely audible wheeze, instantly drowned by the hum of surrounding medical equipment. The neural implant behind his right ear buzzed softly, its translation algorithms activating as the aliens continued their conversation. The device converted their sharp, clicking language into English, though the delay made everything feel slightly off-kilter, like watching a poorly dubbed movie while battling a concussion. "Look at this specimen," the tallest of the three said, gesturing toward William with four-fingered hands. Though a surgical mask covered most of the alien's face, William could discern patches of crimson skin dotted with white spots, like reverse freckles against a sunset sky. Above the mask, emerald eyes glowed intensely. The implant tagged this one as X, based on how the others addressed him. The human body is remarkably fragile. Note the skin thickness, barely 2 millimeters at most points. A Corellian child has thicker dermis than this fully grown warrior. William's eyes tracked X's movements as the alien doctor circled the table. His voice, remarkably masculine, filtered through the strange acoustics of an alien larynx. The doctor's long fingers hovered inches above William's wounds, tracing their outlines in the air as if conducting an orchestra of injury. "The bleeding is particularly concerning," X continued, his emerald eyes narrowing as he examined the plasma burn on William's arm. "Their circulatory fluid, red blood, seems to evacuate the body at the slightest provocation. No quick coagulation enzymes worth mentioning. How they survived long enough to achieve spaceflight is a mystery that eludes me." The second doctor, shorter and stockier than X, leaned in for a closer look. The implant identified this one as Locke's, and William's foggy brain recognized the neutral, almost mechanical quality of his voice from earlier, though he couldn't pinpoint where he'd heard it before. Perhaps during the chaos of his arrival, when consciousness had been a flickering candle in a hurricane. The musculature is equally disappointing. Locke's added through his mask, the same red skin and white dots marking him as the same species as X. "Look at these muscle fibers, thin, stringy things. I've dissected Polarian rodents with more impressive physical development, and they claim to be warriors." A sound that might have been laughter escaped him, a series of rapid clicks the implant didn't bother translating. William tried again to speak, to defend humanity's evolutionary adaptations, to explain that human strength wasn't just about raw muscle mass, but endurance, tool use, and quick wit. But all that emerged was another pitiful wheeze, barely louder than his labored breathing. His fingers pressed against the cold metal of the table, the only movement he could manage beyond the rise and fall of his chest. "Oh, and look at the skeletal structure," Locke continued. "Calcium-based, like most carbon life forms. But it looks so brittle they can break their bones from simple falls." The alien made a gesture that William's implant suggested was equivalent to a shrug, though with the extra joints in their shoulders, it looked more like a wave rippling through their upper body. "It's almost sad, really. Evolution played a cruel joke on these creatures, gave them just enough intelligence to leave their planet, but bodies that can barely survive the journey." William's frustration grew with each word. He knew they were wrong, or at least only seeing part of the picture. Humans might not have the raw durability of some species, but they had something else: quick wit, determination, and with the right medical support, remarkable healing capabilities. The enhancement drugs coursing through his system were proof of that, if only he could make them understand. The third figure, who had remained silent until now, finally stirred. She was shorter than the two males, with the same red skin and white dots visible above her surgical mask, but her eyes were different. A deep purple that seemed to swirl like liquid amethyst. When she spoke, her voice was unmistakably feminine, a tone the translation implant couldn't entirely flatten. "The human is awake," Ali said, cutting through her colleague's mockery. "He has been for the last several minutes." Both male doctors turned to look at William, their eyes showing what might have been surprise, though reading alien expressions was beyond his current skill. X recovered first, his emerald eyes narrowing as he studied William's face. "Conscious, perhaps," X said dismissively, "but hardly aware. Look at him. He can barely keep his eyes focused. The blood loss alone should have him hallucinating." Nevertheless, Ollie persisted, moving closer to the table. Her purple eyes met William's brown ones, and he thought he saw something there, concern, curiosity, perhaps both. "Despite how weak his body appears, we should treat him. He survived the battlefield, escaped certain death, and somehow made it onto our ship. That has to count for something." "Count for something?" His voice rose an octave, which the implant interpreted as incredulity. "We know virtually nothing about human biology beyond these surface observations. Treating him would be like performing surgery in the dark while wearing thermal mittens." Lorx nodded vigorously, his head bobbing in a way that looked almost human despite the different neck structure. "More importantly, we're observers in this conflict. The Galactic Council was very specific about our role here. We document, we study, we report, we do not intervene. Helping a combatant from either side would compromise our neutrality." "The Council would have our heads," Ix agreed, beginning to pace, a nervous habit that apparently transcended species, or worse, our funding. "Do you know how many forms we'd have to fill out if they discovered we'd aided either the Vorsar faction or the Gorsak Alliance? The bureaucratic nightmare alone wouldn't be worth it." Ali's eyes flashed with obvious anger. "So we just let him die after he made it this far?" "It's not our war," Locke said firmly, his neutral voice taking on an edge of authority. "These humans chose to involve themselves in a conflict between powers far greater than them. They knew the risks. Every species knows the risks when they choose violence over diplomacy," Ix added, his tone becoming almost philosophical. "The humans are learning what countless species learned before them. The universe doesn't care about your courage if your body can't back it up." William managed to move his head slightly, just enough to better see Ali as she stood her ground against her colleagues. The movement sent spikes of pain through his neck and shoulders, but he held on, desperate to understand what fate these aliens were deciding for him. "It would be wrong," Ali said simply. "Whatever the politics, whatever the consequences, letting someone die when we have the means to help them is wrong." Lox laughed, those clicking sounds filling the air again. "Wrong is getting involved in affairs that don't concern us." "The medical supplies are expensive," Ix added, pulling up another holographic display. "Do you know what our inventory looks like? We're scheduled to be out here for another 3 cycles. It would be a waste to use the little supplies we have left on a human." "Waste?" Ali's voice rose to match his. "Saving a life is waste. When that life is already forfeit?" "Yes," Locke said bluntly. "Look at him. Even if we knew how to treat humans properly, which we don't, he's lost too much blood. He's dying, Ali. Accept it." "You don't know that," she protested. But William could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Fine," Ix said, throwing up his 4-fingered hands in exasperation. "What would you have us do? Guess at treatments? Experiment on him like some laboratory specimen? That seems crueler than letting nature take its course." "We could at least try," Ali countered. "Try what?" Lox interrupted. Ali fell silent for a moment, her purple eyes moving between her colleagues and William. He tried again to speak, to tell them he had medical supplies in his uniform, that human military personnel carried emergency treatment protocols, but his voice still wouldn't cooperate. All he managed was a slightly louder wheeze that drew their attention for a brief moment before they dismissed it. "What do you suggest, then?" Ellie finally asked, her voice tinged with sadness, since helping is apparently impossible. Ix and Lox exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them that William couldn't interpret. The merciful thing would be the incinerator, Ix said with clinical detachment. Quick, painless, better than slowly bleeding out on a cold table. William's eyes widened, and he redoubled his efforts to speak. This time he managed a word. No. Still, it was enough to draw another round of those clicking laughs from the male doctors. Listen to it, Ix said, not even addressing William directly. Even facing death they struggle, no dignity in their suffering, just base animal instinct to survive, regardless of the futility. The incinerator it is, then, Lox declared with an air of finality. As the senior medical officer present, Ix and I are making this an official directive. Ali, you'll clean up this room and dispose of the human. The incinerator is on level 3, section 7. Make sure you follow the proper biological waste rules. This is an order, not a suggestion, Ix added, when Ali didn't immediately respond. Your compassion is admirable in its way, but misplaced. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is end suffering quickly. The two male doctors moved toward the exit. At the doorway, Lox turned back one more time. And Ali, make sure you sanitize everything properly. We don't know what pathogens these humans might carry. The last thing we need is some earthborn plague spreading through the ship. Then they were gone, and William found himself alone with Ali. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. William could hear his own heartbeat, rapid and thready. He could hear the noise of the medical equipment, could hear Ali's breathing as she stood frozen beside the table. He forced his mouth to work, pushed through the fog of pain and medication to form words. Please, he managed, the word emerging as little more than a breath. Help. Oli moved then, but not toward him. Instead, she walked to the wall and began removing her surgical mask slowly. As it came away, William saw her full face for the first time. The red skin was darker than he'd expected, like dried blood or rich wine, and the white dots formed intricate patterns across her cheeks and forehead. Her purple eyes were large, taking up more of her face than human proportions would allow, and they were filling with what could only be tears, clear liquid that caught the harsh medical lighting like tiny prisms. She removed her other medical equipment piece by piece, gloves that accommodated her 4 fingers, a protective apron, sensor devices wrapped around her arms. The silence stretched between them. William's fear ratcheted up with each passing second. Was she preparing to take him to the incinerator? Was she steeling herself for what she had to do? When she finally moved toward him, William tried again to speak, to beg, to make any sound that might change her mind. But she reached the table and began to unlock the wheels underneath, preparing to move him. The stretcher lurched slightly as it came free from its docking station, and fresh pain flared through William's wounds. Please, he whispered again. The words barely audible. Don't want to die. Molly began pushing the stretcher toward the door. William's heart hammered against his ribs as they left the medical room and entered a corridor. The walls were the same gunmetal gray as the medical room, but with strips of glowing material providing guidance along the floor. Other aliens passed them, more of the same species, some wearing what looked like military uniforms, others in civilian clothes. No one paid them any attention, but Ali kept looking from side to side, her purple eyes darting nervously, as if watching for something or someone. Her behavior didn't match someone simply following orders to dispose of biological waste. When William tried to speak again to ask what was happening, she suddenly placed one of her large hands over his mouth. The pressure was significant. Her hand easily covered the lower half of his face, making breathing difficult. He could only pull in thin streams of air through his nose as she abruptly changed direction, yanking the stretcher into a sharp turn that sent fresh waves of agony through his injured abdomen. They were in a smaller corridor now, one that seemed less traveled. The lighting was dimmer here, and William could hear the distant rumble of engines or machinery. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Was this the way to the incinerator? Was she taking some shortcut to avoid being seen disposing of him? Another sharp turn, and they crossed another door. William's eyes adjusted to the new environment, and his racing thoughts stuttered to a confused halt. This wasn't an incinerator room. Instead, he found himself looking at what could only be described as a cleaning supply closet. Shelves lined the walls, filled with containers of various sizes and colors. Some glowed, others seemed to absorb light. There were tools he couldn't identify, cloths and brushes in alien designs, and an overwhelming smell of something between ammonia and citrus. Ollie finally removed her hand from his mouth and leaned close, her purple eyes intense with something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't quite hope, either. "What can I do to save you?" she asked. "I don't know human medicine, but I know you survived this long. There must be something." Relief flooded through William so intensely that for a moment he couldn't speak at all. When he finally found his voice, it was stronger than it had been since he'd woken. "Antibiotics," he managed, his military training kicking in despite the pain. "In my uniform's standard-issue medkit, left chest pocket." Allie's four-fingered hands moved quickly, searching through his torn and bloodied uniform until she found the small metal case. Inside were several auto-injectors, each labeled with military designation codes that meant nothing to her but everything to him. "The blue one first," William instructed, his voice gaining strength with hope. "Broad-spectrum antibiotics, then the yellow pain management and clotting factors." She followed his directions without hesitation, her training evident in how she handled the injectors despite their alien design to her. The relief was almost immediate as the drugs entered his system, military-grade pharmaceuticals designed for exactly this kind of situation. "Now the wounds," William continued, guiding her through the process. "Clean them first. Whatever you use for sterilization should work. Alcohol-based, if you have it." Hallie moved quickly, combining her extensive medical knowledge with his guidance. She found cleaning supplies that burned like fire when applied but would kill any bacteria. Her four-fingered hands were surprisingly gentle as she worked, cleaning away dried blood and debris from his injuries. "No projectiles," William said, gritting his teeth through the pain of her administrations. "Plasma burns and lacerations only. Just need to close what you can." She produced what looked like a pen-like device from one of the shelves. "This is for sealing cuts on our skin. I don't know if—" "Try it," William said, carefully. The device worked, though it took several attempts to find the right setting for human skin. The familiar smell of cauterized flesh filled the small room as she sealed the worst of his lacerations. The plasma burn was trickier. The tissue was already cauterized but needed protection. "In the red injector," William said, his voice growing stronger as the pain medication took effect. "Rapid, healing accelerant. Experimental stuff has to go directly into muscle tissue near the wound sites." Ollie looked at the injector with obvious concern. "Experimental. Everyone knows there are long-term side effects," William admitted with a weak laugh. "But the short-term effect is accelerated healing. Military's been using variations of it for years. Makes us heal overnight, what should take weeks. Repeated use takes years off our lives. But when the alternative is dying, like today." She administered the injection, and William felt the familiar burn of the accelerant entering his system. It was like liquid fire spreading through his muscles, but he knew that by morning his body would have repaired most of the damage. "Thank you," he said, meeting her purple eyes. "You saved my life." "I hope so," Ollie replied, standing back to survey her work. "I'm leaving you here tonight. It's a storage room that's rarely used. I'll check on you in the morning." "I'll survive," William said with more confidence than he felt. "The accelerant is powerful stuff. By morning, you'll see what humans are really capable of." She looked skeptical but nodded. "I hope you're right, human William. I hope you're right." As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Good luck," she said softly. Then was gone, leaving William alone in the storage room with nothing but the low-pitched vibration of the ship's engines and the burning sensation of rapid healing coursing through his veins. Ali didn't sleep at all during the night. The possible consequences of her disobedience to her seniors and her worry about leaving the human alone kept her eyes open. She lay in her narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of her private quarters as the ship's night cycle slowly gave way to the artificial dawn. Every sound in the corridor outside made her hearts race. She had two, like all of her species, and right now both were beating entirely out of sync, creating an uncomfortable flutter in her chest. Were those footsteps coming to arrest her? Was that discussion outside about the missing human? When the soft chime announced the beginning of the day shift, Allie practically jumped from her bed. Her usual morning routine, a luxury she normally savored, was abandoned entirely. The shower was skipped. She pulled on her medical uniform with shaking hands, fumbling with the bio-seal closures that normally snapped together without effort. Her reflection in the small mirror showed someone who looked guilty, her purple eyes dim with exhaustion, the white dots on her red skin seeming to show her anxiety, and even her usually perfect posture hunched with worry. The living area of the ship was already bustling when she emerged from her quarters. The research vessel housed nearly 300 individuals of her species, the Karani, along with a handful of other observer species. Usually, Allie enjoyed the morning's social ritual, but today every glance in her direction felt like an accusation. When Medic Jarix nodded at her in greeting, she was certain he knew about her betrayal. When Security Chief Dak's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than usual, she was convinced he was about to call for her arrest. Her mind conjured elaborate scenarios with each interaction. They had found William during the night, discovered her deception, burned him in the incinerator as originally ordered, and now were simply waiting for the right moment to confront her with her crimes. "Allah, you look terrible," her roommate from academy days, Nixel, commented as she passed. "Rough night." "Couldn't sleep," Ali managed. "Worried about a patient." Nixel's expression softened with sympathy. "The human from yesterday. I heard Ix and Lox talking. Don't blame yourself. Some species just aren't meant to survive out here." The casual dismissal of William's life made Allie's stomach churn, but she forced herself to nod and continue walking. She had to check on him, had to know if the experimental medication he'd mentioned had worked, or if she'd simply prolonged his suffering. But as she approached the medical bay, her nerves got the better of her. If she went straight to the storage room, someone might notice. She needed supplies anyway. Water and food in case he had survived. Yes, that was logical. She was just being thorough. The nutrition center was automated, dispensing species-appropriate meals based on biometric scans. Ali requisitioned a selection of items: water, which most carbon-based life forms could process, and several types of protein and carbohydrate supplements designed to be cross-species compatible. She packed them into a medical supply bag, trying to look like she was simply stocking up for a normal shift. Her path to the storage room took her through less traveled corridors. She moved with exaggerated stealth, pressing herself against walls at intersections, peering around corners like some character from the human entertainment broadcasts they'd intercepted. Part of her mind recognized how ridiculous she must look, but the fear of discovery overrode any embarrassment. The corridor leading to the storage room was empty, just as it had been the night before. The door was still sealed with her medical override code, a small mercy that meant no one had tried to enter during the night. Ali input the code, holding her breath as the door slid open. What she saw inside made her drop the supply bag with a clatter that echoed in the small space. William was sitting up, not lying down, not struggling to breathe, not dying or dead. Sitting. "Morning," William said, his voice clear and strong. "I'd stand to greet you properly, but I'm still a bit wobbly. That accelerant packs a punch during the healing process." Allie stood frozen in the doorway, her purple eyes wide with shock. Her years of training, warred with the impossibility of what she was seeing. Tissue regeneration at this rate should have been biologically impossible without massive energy input and cellular damage. "You're talking," she managed finally. "Among other things." William grinned, then winced slightly. "Though I could really use some water. The rapid healing dehydrates you badly." That snapped Ali out of her shock. She grabbed the supply bag and rushed forward, pulling out the water container. William took it gratefully, drinking in long sips while she circled him like a predator evaluating prey, her medical instincts overriding social niceties. "This is amazing," she muttered, reaching out to touch the newly healed skin on his abdomen. The cellular regeneration rate alone should have caused massive systemic failure. "Hey," William protested, trying to bat her hands away as she began prodding at the healing wounds. "Easy there. I'm better, not invulnerable." "But that's impressive," Allie continued, ignoring his protests as she examined the plasma burn site. "Your metabolism would need to increase by at least 300%. The caloric demands alone." "Why do you think I'm so hungry?" William interrupted. "Hope you brought me something." "Let me see the injection site," Allie demanded. "You're worse than our medics," William grumbled, but he shifted to show her where she'd administered the experimental drug. The injection site was hardly visible, just a small red mark that could have been weeks old. She sat back on her haunches, a resting position natural to her species, but probably odd to human eyes, studying William with the intensity of a scientist discovering a new phenomenon. "Your doctors were wrong," William said, after a moment of silence, "about humans being weak. We're not built like your species. Sure, we don't have natural armor or redundant organs or whatever advantages evolution gave you, but we're persistent. Then, with our medical technology, we can recover from injuries that would kill most species." "I'm impressed," Allie said, still staring at the healing wounds. "The implications for xenomedicine." "Slow down there, doctor," William said, with a chuckle. "I'm grateful for the save, but I'm not volunteering to be a lab rat." That seemed to snap Allie back to reality. Her purple eyes widened as the full situation crashed back down on her. "Oh," she breathed. "You're alive. You're actually alive. What am I gonna do with you now?" "I was hoping you'd have some ideas about that," William admitted. "Can't exactly walk out of here and catch a shuttle home. The captain took off with the ship during the night cycle," Allie explained, beginning to pace in the small space, 3 steps one way, turn, 3 steps back. "We're no longer stationed. We're heading to the next observation point, which is half a planet away from where you boarded. So I can't just leave the way I came in," William said, processing this information. "How long until the next port?" 6 cycles, about 15 of your Earth days," Ollie replied. "And that's assuming the captain doesn't change course." "But William, I can't hide you for 15 days. I can't even hide you for 15 hours. Soon someone will notice the medical supplies I used, or wonder why I'm acting strange, or—" "Hey, breathe," William said, recognizing the signs of panic, "or whatever you do that's equivalent. We'll figure this out." "I can't take you to the incinerator now," Ollie continued, her pacing growing more agitated. "Everyone thinks you're already disposed of. If I show up with you alive, they'll know I disobeyed direct orders. That's a career-ending offense, maybe even criminal charges." "What about escape pods?" William asked suddenly. "This ship has to have escape pods, right?" Ollie stopped pacing. "Yes, of course. Emergency evacuation protocol requires 1 pod per every 10 crew members. Can they be launched manually without triggering ship-wide alerts?" "I don't know," Allie said slowly. "They're designed for emergency situations where command structure might be compromised. But William, we're in space. I don't think my ship will pick me up." William interrupted. "I have a locator beacon. Once I'm off this ship, they'll find me. Might take a day or 2 floating in space, but the pods have life support, right?" "Yes," but Ali paused. "Considering, you'd really risk that. Floating alone in space, hoping your people find you. Better than the incinerator," William pointed out with dark humor. "And better than getting you in trouble. You saved my life. I'm not repaying that by destroying your career. You're very confident your people will find you." William's expression grew serious. "Humans don't leave people behind. It's kind of our thing. They'll look for me until they find me or confirm I'm dead. The beacon will make sure they find me." Lai was quiet for a long time, all 4 of her fingers on each hand flexing in what William was learning was a sign of deep thought. "I could tell them I put you in the incinerator but forgot to turn it on," William offered. "Make it look like your mistake, not disobedience. You were upset, distracted. It happens." You'd lie for me? You saved my life, William repeated. Plus, it's barely a lie, more like creative interpretation of events. I'm terrible at deception, Allie admitted, her voice small. My spots change color when I'm nervous. Everyone always knows when I'm lying. William looked closer and noticed that the white dots on her skin were indeed shifting, taking on a slightly bluish tinge that hadn't been there before. Then, we'll have to make sure you don't have to lie, William said, his memory kicking in as he began formulating a plan. We go to the escape pods. You help me launch. If anyone asks, you were disposing of the body, and there was a malfunction, you'll be a victim of circumstances, not a traitor. That might work, Ollie said slowly. But we'd have to reach the pods without being seen. They're on level 5. That's a significant distance from here. Can you get me something to wear that won't immediately scream human patience? William asked. Maybe maintenance coveralls or something. I can try, Ollie said, her natural problem-solving instincts beginning to override her panic. There's a supply depot 2 sections over. But William, can you walk that far? You said you're still weak. William carefully pushed himself to his feet, using the wall for support. His legs shook slightly, but held. I can make it. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug, and knowing the alternative is getting you arrested is pretty motivating. They spent the next few minutes planning their route. Ali sketched out a rough map on a cleaning cloth with a marker she found among the supplies, showing William the least traveled paths to the escape pods. Your species is smaller than ours, but these are for the Vex workers, she explained. They're even smaller than humans. It'll have to do. William pulled on the coveralls, rolling up the legs and arms as best he could. He looked ridiculous, but not immediately human, which was all they needed. Ready? He asked. As ready as I can be for committing career suicide, she replied. But there was a hint of determination in her voice that hadn't been there before. They slipped out of the storage room, Ali taking point while William shuffled behind her, trying to make himself appear smaller and less noticeable. The first corridor was empty, just as Ali had predicted. They moved quickly but carefully, Ali's medical access badge opening doors that would have been sealed to general crew. The journey through the ship's corridors was tense, but initially successful. Ali walked slightly ahead, using her medical credentials to access restricted passages that saw less traffic. William followed, keeping his head down and trying to mimic the gait of the smaller Vex workers whose coveralls he wore. They made it past the first checkpoint without incident. Then the second. By the third, William was beginning to believe they might actually pull this off. The escape pod bay was just ahead, its distinctive hexagonal door visible at the end of the corridor. That's when everything went wrong. Halt! A sharp voice commanded in the clicking language of the Qurani. William's implant translated it a fraction of a second later, but Ali had already frozen in place. A group of security officers emerged from an adjoining corridor, led by 2 figures William recognized even through his exhaustion-fogged vision. Ix and Lox, the doctors from the night before. Their emerald and neutral eyes widened in perfect synchronization as they took in the scene before them. That's impossible, Ix breathed, his usually commanding voice reduced to a whisper. You're dead. We ordered. You ordered her to dispose of a dying human, William said, straightening despite the pain it caused. Looks like I wasn't as close to death as you thought. Lox's eyes darted between William and Ali, his expression cycling through confusion, amazement, and finally settling on anger. You disobeyed a direct order. You used medical supplies without authorization. Mo used his supplies, Ali interrupted, her voice steadier than William expected. The human's own medications, and some basic cleaning materials. Nothing from our inventory. That's not the point. Ix's voice rose to a pitch that made William's implant crackle. You deliberately disobeyed senior medical staff. You compromised our neutrality. You saved my life, William interjected, which I thought was the whole point of being doctors. Stay out of this, human, Lox snarled. You have no understanding of what she's done. The consequences will be severe, Ix finished. Years of incarceration, the end of her medical career, possible exile from the research fleet entirely. William saw Ali's spots shift to that bluish tinge again, her whole body trembling. The security officers were moving to surround them. Their intentions clear. In a few seconds, Ali would be under arrest, and he'd probably be heading for that incinerator after all. He leaned close to Ali's ear and whispered, "Sorry about what I'm about to do." Before she could question him, William grabbed her arm and yanked her backward toward the escape pod door. He pressed all the buttons. The door opened, revealing a small pod designed for emergency evacuation. "Stop them," Ix shouted, but William was already pulling Ali inside. He laughed at the absurdity of it all as the pod door sealed behind them. The doctors and security officers pounded on the transparent viewing port, their shouts muffled but clearly furious. William's fingers reached for the control panel, initiating the emergency launch sequence. "What are you doing?" Ali gasped, and suddenly William realized their positions. In his haste to pull her into the pod, she had ended up on top of him, her greater weight pressing directly against his still tender wounds. The pain was excruciating, but he couldn't help but continue laughing. "Saving you," he managed between gasps of pain and laughter. "Can't arrest you if you're not here." The pod's engines fired, and they were thrown back against the rear wall as it ejected from the ship. Through the viewing port, William could see the research vessel rapidly shrinking as they fell toward the planet below, a green and blue world that looked almost Earth-like in the morning light of its star. "This is insane," Ali said, her purple eyes wide with panic as she realized what had happened. "What's going to happen to me now? I can't go back. They'll arrest me the moment I return. My career, my life, everything is ruined." "I'm sorry," William said, finally managing to adjust their positions, so her weight wasn't directly on his injuries. "I'll do everything I can to help you. We've got the best diplomatic corps I know. They'll sort this out." "Sort this out?" Ali's voice pitched higher. "I just became an accomplice to I don't even know what this is." "Rescue of injured military personnel," William said with more confidence than he felt. "You provided emergency medical aid to a wounded soldier and were coerced into leaving when it became clear your superiors would punish you for following basic medical ethics. That's our story, and we're sticking to it." The pod continued its descent, the planet growing larger in the viewing port. William activated his locator beacon and checked the pod's basic systems. Life support was good for 72 hours, more than enough time for pickup. "Your skills saved my life," William said, meeting Ali's purple eyes. "Those skills could save a lot more lives. My people could use a xenomed specialist for a while, someone who understands non-human biology. The pay is good, and we don't arrest people for actually helping patients." "You're offering me a job?" Ali asked incredulously, "while we're plummeting toward an unknown planet in a stolen escape pod." "Borrowed," William corrected. "And yes, though technically HR will have to do the formal interview." Despite everything, Ali let out a sound that might have been laughter, a musical trilling that the implant didn't translate. "This is not how I expected my day to go." "Hey, 12 hours ago, you thought I'd be dead," William pointed out. "Sometimes life surprises you." As the planet rushed up to meet them, the pod's automatic systems engaging to slow their descent, Ali found herself thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. She'd saved a human's life on principle, and now that decision would change everything. Her career with the research fleet was over. That much was certain. But looking at William, battered but alive, joking even while in obvious pain, she wondered if perhaps that was a good thing. The pod's retro thrusters fired, and William said words that sounded like apology and encouragement mixed together as the G-forces pressed them back. "Don't worry, the landing will be rough but survivable. My people will find us within 6 hours. Tops. Until then, we just need to—" The pod hit atmosphere, and conversation became impossible over the roar of entry. Ali watched the flames dance across the viewing port and realized that her skills could indeed be more useful down here rather than on a ship where saving lives was considered insubordination. The consequences of saving William would ripple through her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine, even if they did involve plummeting toward an alien planet with a species that everyone said was too weak to survive, but had somehow managed to heal overnight and laugh in the face of impossible odds. Humans, she was learning, were full of surprises. Before generating images for the HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy script, I need confirmation that you want me to proceed with creating these images based on the provided script. Below are 20 prompts tailored to key scenes and elements from the script, designed to capture its vivid imagery and emotional depth. Each prompt is crafted to produce a visually striking depiction of the narrative's sci-fi setting, characters, and atmosphere. Please confirm if you'd like me to generate images based on these prompts or if you have specific preferences for certain scenes or styles.